National Express card, the most honored credit card the world over. With it, I can borrow hundreds of thousands without paying interest. Whether it's throwing a party, or financing a political campaign, or just putting up collateral for another loan. National Express gives me the credibility I need. Maybe my old friend Jimmy Carter doesn't need one, but you and I do. National Express card. Don't leave office without it. Well, there's nothing else left to say except live from New York, it's Saturday night.
Hello and welcome to the Not Ready for Primetime podcast. We're Gary Seath and Brad Robinson.
Here now, the podcast with the Not Ready for Primetime podcast news team.
This week, we are talking about Season 3.
We're back!
Episode 1 with host Steve Martin and musical guest Jackson Browne. This show originally aired on September 24th, 1977. Brad,
hello.
It's Season 3.
It is here. Season 3 is upon us.
Are you excited? I don't need to ask. I know you're excited.
I am. Yes.
This feels like the beginning of a big push for the show.
It's funny because I was going to say the beginning of the end, but yes, I agree with you as well. That's a bit, no. I'm trying, went negative too early. No. I know on the surface, yes, I'm very excited because it's Season 3. It's what everybody I think thinks of when they think of the original era. It's, those first two seasons are behind us. They found their footing. They've got more money and they start really going broad, in the comedy a bit. And I think this is really where we start seeing everything that people know and genuinely love about the early era. So on the positive side, yes, I'm extremely excited for it. I can't wait to see it. Like morale is very high. I'm sure my expectations are way too high going into it. But because it's like, yes, this is what you think of. You don't think of Season 1 figuring it out. You don't really think of Season 2 with all the danger and all the exploring and experimental stuff, which we realized we loved in Season 2.
Yeah.
You really think of Season 3.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think we have high expectations for Seasons 3 and 4, and there are a lot of reasons that we have that. And so I'm curious to see how this entire season lives up to those expectations.
And and right off the gate, they kick it off, Steve Martin's hosting. He'll host 3 times this year.
Right.
Buck hosts twice. I feel like they really start doing a great job getting musical guests that are both hip and timely and bigger deals. And back to the host too, I don't think we're getting as many of those question mark hosts. Your Roger Crawfords, your Desi Arnazes, like maybe 1 or 2, save an 80-year-old grandmother. The hosts you get are names, especially at that time, were big names. And they're really starting to find that this season.
There are a few episodes this season that are historic in nature, and there's a lot going on behind the scenes or in front of the camera with some of these episodes that we are definitely looking forward to talking about because they have such, lore to them. Mm-hmm. So it'll be fun. I'm excited about this season.
It's a new show. This off season, I've got John Belushi makes the cover of Crawdaddy over the summer with the article my buddy Mitch Glazer wrote. The show is definitely getting bigger mainstream. As we mentioned kind of at the end of last season, they start getting a lot more money. We see it this episode right off the bat with production value and sets. There's new sets, both home base and weekend update. The pre-tapes are a lot more polished. Right. And we should say, we mentioned, there's an 80-year-old grandmother. They run their episode long runner of Anyone Can Host, as are we. And this is our last week. We've got till Friday. So anybody who hasn't submitted yet, you have till Friday. Send us an email, 25 words or less, to notreadyforptpod.com. The number 4, notreadyforptpod @gmail.com on why you want to host. And we will have Anyone Can Host later this season.
I'm really looking forward to that. That'll be fun.
I'm looking forward to just coasting on one episode. So yeah, I can't wait.
One episode? You haven't been coasting so far?
Shots fired. But to that point I did bring up earlier, you know, I said on the surface level, yeah, I think this is great. There's a lot of anticipation, morale is high, you're excited for stuff. But when you start to dig deeper, and I don't want to get into it too much now because I'm sure we will as the season goes on, but it is a little bit the beginning of the end. You know, by the end of the season, O'Donoghue's gone, Marilyn Suzanne Miller leaves.
Right.
It's kind of, you know, there's a big, we'll talk about it in the fall. We get 2 new writers because of a big writer shakeup that happens in the fall where we get Don Novello and Brian Del Murray come in. So I feel like this is kind of, this season 3 is the last gasp of what you would really call the original version of Saturday Night Live, because you start losing writers, you get new writers who come in, as we'll talk about. I'm sure Franken and Davis take a bigger role. I think Zweibel takes a little bit of a lesser role. And as you mentioned, there's just a lot of back and forth going on behind the scenes that just really starts to just continue from this season on. And this is really that last hang on of the original SNL.
I mean, it's still, you know, kind of finding its feet in many ways too, or finding its legs, I should say. That's the expression. This season as it goes on, and they all start to kind of fall into place as we know them now, I think. Right? Like the first 2 seasons, everyone was kind of finding themselves in their place in the show. And this season is where they start, like John becomes John, for instance, right? And they all start to kind of fall into place.
Well, yeah, and I think for better or for worse, I think you're right. Like, yeah, John and Gilda, like the show is the John and Gilda show. To the flip side of that, Garrett and Lorraine, I think, fall off a lot more than they did in the past. I think there's a lot of times and instances where they're fighting to get on the show, or Lauren's like forcing writers to write them into sketches because it's, Dan is obviously still Dan. He does his thing, but it's like you're doing John sketches, you're doing Gilda sketches. And yeah, everyone kind of falls into their roles and that's what the people want. And so they live on that, at least for this season and next season, until, you have John and Dan for one more season at least.
Right.
But even this season is the start of it, where John, the first few weeks of the season is filming Going South, so he's not around, and then he goes and films Animal House, and that's the big discussion in between season 3 and 4 is, Animal House comes out and John becomes huge, and the Blues Brothers become a thing. But we're here in season 3 now, and I think it's exciting to get into it. I think it's psyched to just get into this new kind of mini era of the first 5 seasons. It's like we got through 1 and 2, now we get into 3 and 4.
Yes. And no better way to really kick off the season than having Steve Martin come back to host.
Oh my God. I mean, yeah, he hosted twice last season, 3 times this season. Yeah. I mean, the guy is, and when does he not perform? When is he not good on the show? I mean, is it not really a surprise he hosts 3 times in one season?
But since we saw him last, he's released his comedy album, which he recorded right after his last hosting gig, I believe.
Yeah. Shortly.
So he is now starting to blow up and become the stand-up comic in the United States.
Yeah, it's funny. As you say it, it doesn't sound like a lot. Like all he's did since we last saw him is release a comedy album. But I don't think we can state how important that was and what a big deal he was.
Right.
Like, yeah, he wasn't doing movies or TV yet, but like he was like the biggest thing at the time. There were reports when he was on SNL during this time that viewership would go up like by 1 million a night when he was on. Like that's how big of a deal he was as a comedian, as a stand-up comedian.
Right.
Like his stand-up albums would be like top 10 Billboard albums as a stand-up.
That's amazing.
Just, you can't fathom it nowadays.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And the way that he plays with the cast.
Yeah.
And having him come in and with Jackson Browne too, right? Like Jackson Browne was not nearly as big as he would become later. And definitely not as big a name as Steve Martin was.
That's a good point, yeah.
But he has some appeal to folks anyway. So kicking off the season with the 2 of them is a great way to start the show.
It is. Everything is there. Everything is there. Everything's there for this to be, see what you're doing. Everything is there for this to be a great episode. I agree.
Yeah. Well, should we just get into it then?
I feel like we might as well now, yeah.
Okay. So the cold open starts in an Oval Office again. So we have the chyron that says an Oval Office. We're still doing that thing. Whatever.
I see what you're trying to do. I'm not going to fall for it. Keep going. We're 5 minutes into season 3. I'm not going to start complaining.
Okay. We'll wait. The show opens with President Carter, again, played by Dan, of course. And my first note was a very sweaty John Belushi.
Because my first note was no mustache.
Oh, yes.
Dan Aykroyd, no mustache.
Right. Yes, that's true. The two of them are talking in an Oval Office. John is playing Burt Lance, who was Jimmy Carter's budget director who was forced to resign due to a scandal.
Duh. Everyone knew that.
It's very quick, their interaction of Carter saying, you have to resign. We know you didn't do anything wrong, whatever. And then John, as Burt Lance, turns to camera and does an American Express, what they call it, National Express commercial, where he pitches to the camera, whatever. It's a way to get recognized. It's the old American Express tagline. This totally threw me off. I was not expecting.
Oh, really?
This. Yeah.
Maybe because they did it in season 1.
Yeah. No, I wasn't expecting it in this moment for it to, and so quickly. I think that's what it was too. It was fast. It was right to camera. And then they do the end of the American Express card where it puts Burt Lance's name on it. And then it goes back to John, who just sets up Dan with saying something to the effect of, there's nothing else left for me to say. And then the camera zooms in on Dan, who does Live from New York, which also surprised me.
It's an odd opening, but it isn't. Like, I get why they're doing it. You know, we were talking about the show is rising in promise. They probably have more people watching the show, especially with Steve Martin hosting,
right?
Than they did at the end of season 2. So yes, much like the Mardi Gras episode, you throw Jimmy Carter out there, something anyone watching who may not be familiar with the show can recognize and cling on to a little bit. So I get why they open with Carter, but this particular sketch is so weird, especially because like I said, they went back to the well. They did this joke with Hurricane Carter in season 1. So it's like literally the same joke, just with a different quote unquote, celebrity person. That threw me off a little bit. And then to your point too, it was very short and had a very kind of weird low energy to kick off the season. I like you, it finished and I was kind of like, oh, that's it. Okay, cool. And I mean, I get it. It's they're coming into season 3. Those are your stars. It's John and Dan are the stars of the show. So you're going to lead off with the two of them.
I guess you're right. They're the two that you want to kick off the season with. I just felt like it was a weak sketch for the two of them because Dan's Carter was not on screen very long at all. And this was totally playing to a 1977 audience, which makes sense with the Burt Lance thing.
Well, it's a commercial parody. Yeah. I mean, you're basically doing a commercial parody to kick off the show, as opposed to we had said, by the end of season 2, they were writing great stuff for Dan doing Jimmy Carter. Right. And that's not in this. This is not a Jimmy Carter sketch. This is what's his name? Burt Lance?
Burt Lance, yes.
Burt Lance. This is a Burt Lance sketch with Jimmy Carter as the supporting character.
It was a strange sketch. It was a weird way to kick off the season. I didn't feel like it got any better with the opening credits, which were also weird and new.
These credits are fucking weird, man. These are bizarre. I remember the Jumbotron, but I had completely forgotten this. Basically what we're talking about is, they do the Jumbotron, which is cool, Times Square thing. It's fun. But then when they announce each cast member, I don't know what was more weird, how amazingly inaccurate the Jumbotron image of the person was, or the real video that they superimpose over top of it of live action, the person awkwardly staring into the camera, not knowing what to do. It's just so bizarre.
It's so weird.
It's so weird.
If anyone listening hasn't seen this, if you don't want to watch the show or whatever, just go to YouTube and I'm sure you can find the opening credits for this episode.
You got to look at this episode because they changed this. I guarantee you, week 2, this is gone. There's no way this lasts.
Right. I hope so.
It's so bizarre.
And to your point, some of them look like Bill's looks
Bill Murray's
nothing
so
like.
bad.
It's so bad.
And then Bill Murray comes on and he has this face of what am I supposed to do? He doesn't smile. He's just standing. He's just staring.
Gilda looks so pissed.
When you think of this opening credit, Times Square-ness of Gilda, you think of her wearing, I think she's wearing a Yankees cap and she bites the apple and she looks up like she's having so much fun. That is not this at all.
She looks so angry. It threw me off. I was really happy when this was over.
It's really weird. If you haven't seen it, go check it out just for the weirdness of it, because you're never going to see it again.
No, thank God. So then we go to Steve for his monologue, and we have a brand new home base.
More changes, which I like. It's bigger, it's brighter.
It's so
nice.
much brighter. It's much bigger.
The band's there. You're walking out through the band. The band's in the background the whole time, which
you see Howard Shore directing the band, interacting with Steve Martin. And Steve comes out and does a set, a small set, but it's a set.
Yeah. Did you like it? Did you like this set you speak of?
Well, it started out pretty slow, I thought. And then he got to a Farrah Fawcett Majors joke, which made me laugh. Do you remember the Farrah Fawcett Majors joke? He says something about she hasn't returned his calls even after all the hours he spent holding her poster up with one hand.
With one hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And then he gets into a cat routine, which is pretty funny, of his cat
handcuffs. Yeah.
But I agree with you. It was weird because it felt very disjointed.
Yes.
It was a weird monologue because we've seen him do 2 great stand-up monologues. And this is kind of one of the weirder monologues we've seen from a stand-up. But it did feel very much what we'll come to think a monologue being.
Yes.
A host going through whatever it is, jokes or some kind of routine. And then he introduces, hey, here's our musical guest along with our special guest. Yes. We'll be right back.
Right.
Like
he ties
everything up.
Right.
Yeah.
He goes into that with, we have a great show tonight, and he talks about Jackson Browne. He brings up Franken and Davis, and he says, we'll be right back. That was something that I think he did it his last time here. I think it was him in season 2. Someone did that outro from the monologue. But him doing it here caught my attention of, one of those things that I said, oh, these are parts of season 3 that we still see today. And his toss at the end was that. So that wasn't his best. For sure. I think it was his worst monologue of the 3 we've seen so far.
Which to be fair, like a quote unquote worst Steve Martin monologue.
Exactly.
It's still pretty good.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, the bar, this is it's the season premiere. Everyone's excited for it. And then you bring in Steve Martin. It's like expectations are so high.
Right.
Like if you don't knock it out of the park, you're going to be considered as a failure. It's like,
yes.
Yeah. You have 4 months to pull this together and you get Steve in. And it's just like, how could this not be gold?
Right. I thought that the first commercial parody of the season was gold.
Oh, it's classic. This is a great one.
Yeah. It's a commercial for the Royal Deluxe 2. So this is a commercial for a car that Dan is the pitchman for. And he's talking about it's such a smooth ride. They're going to have a rabbi come in and do a circumcision in the back seat while they're driving 40 miles an hour over this really rough road. That's the commercial. This is a good one. I love this one.
I love that the parents don't go on the ride.
Right?
The parents walk out of it's Gilda and some dude, and they walk out and they hand the baby to the rabbi. And then Garrett's the chauffeur, Dan's the pitchman. They take off and the parents just left there in the driveway. I love the whole thing happens. I don't know why. I just love the fact that like they're not there for the entire thing and they come back and hand the baby off at the end.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's really good. Dan's really good in this. The rabbi's really good. I don't know who that is.
Yeah, it's a great way to kick off season 3. Like this is, and the production value is all there. It's really funny. I feel like this was Zweibel, but I couldn't confirm it. But this just has the Zweibel feel to me. It's so smart. And it actually, it's a parody of an actual commercial that Mercury was doing at the time where they had a diamond cutter come out. Knowing that, it's even better. But even if you don't know the commercial and the reference of what they're doing, because it's a pretty spot on parody of the real commercial, it's just so funny and it's really so smart. This is one of the best commercial parodies of this era, I think.
I think you're right. Yeah. And I was really happy that it was season 3, episode 1 right away. First thing we see after the monologue.
And it has that season 3 vibe of like, we can do better stuff. Like they're in a moving car, like doing stuff. It's not like in front of a green screen or like they're out and about. And it's like, you could tell like there's production value to it that you're like, okay, this is season 3 where we've taken a step up this season.
We've also taken a step up in the next sketch, which starts out with Gilda and Jane playing ping pong in what looks like the rec room of an apartment building. I think it's referenced as, when in walk the Festrunk Brothers.
Excuse me, sorry to interrupt, but I was just wondering something. I am Jorge Festrunk, and this is my brother, Jortak. We have a wash going in the next room, and we need some change for the dryer. Can you help?
I'm sorry, I don't have any change.
Well, you know, usually we have lots of change because we are both swinging guys. Both my brother Yortuk and I enjoy doing many things.
We are two wild and crazy guys.
I'll say...
Why, just the other day, we were enjoying ourselves so much, I can't tell you.
Here.
Thanks.
Say, you know, this is some swinging singles apartment building rec room. You could have here many good swinging times, which you would enjoy a great deal.
It's so far out and together.
Look at you swinging girls having such a good time enjoying yourselves here and now.
Don't mention it.
My brother and I are from Czechoslovakia, even though no one can tell.
No, it's funny because this is not the clip
Sure.
you think of when you think of these characters. This is it was kind of a combination of, Steve was doing this kind of swinging continental guy character, like wild and crazy guy was one of his lines from his stand-up routine. Right. Dan had this like Czech character he was working on, so they kind of melded the two. And they brought Marilyn Suzanne Miller in. So like Marilyn Suzanne Miller, along with Dan and Steve, created these characters. And so it's one of those things, like in hindsight, I enjoy this a lot more because like, what these guys become. So you're like, okay, here's the first time you see it. I feel like they're very subdued versions of these characters. They're going to grow leaps and bounds from what they are here.
But again, like this is one of those where you see the foundation in this first sketch and you understand what they're going to build on as they move forward.
Yeah, the kernels are all here, the swinging and two wild and crazy guys and big American breasts and the random lines that don't make any sense out of context. Like everything is here. They just have to massage it and find out how to make it work. And Steve's even said, like the first time we did it, there were a couple chuckles because there's not a lot of laughs in this sketch, in this very long sketch, I must say too. He tells a story about how they were like brain surgeons or had medical degrees, which is a lot of stuff Marilyn Suzanne Miller brought into this. She would talk, these cabbies that would be driving around New York City and would tell stories about how they were like doctors in their homes, in their home countries. And now they're here driving cabs in New York City and would always try to hit on her. And it's funny. She does, friend of the pod, Ian Talks Comedy, has a great episode where he talks to Marilyn Suzanne Miller and Rosie Schuster. And check it out. It's really good. And Marilyn talks a lot about, the creation of these characters and how she came up with them. And she was really integral in like writing these sketches, like if not as much or more so than like Dan with the, with what the guys would say and their interaction, how they were treating the women, all that stuff. It's really funny. So all that stuff is there. It's just not there yet. Right. Like you said, it's the kernels of it all being there.
I thought Jane and Gilda were good in this sketch too, like as the straight characters and the way they interacted with them. And then they tell them that they will meet them at the club, but go to the Holland Tunnel. We'll meet you there in the middle. Yeah.
Oh, right. The Holland, know, the guy who takes the change of the Holland Tunnel. Yeah. By the time we see these characters at the end of season 3, it will be down to perfection of what they are.
That'll be fun. Well, keeping with the fun, Steve's back and he introduces Jackson Browne, who plays Running on Empty. Are you a big Jackson Browne fan, Brad?
I don't know. I don't know. I feel like Jackson Browne is very polarizing. No,
maybe. Like
people either love him or like despise him. Like I genuinely don't know if I like the song or not. I did like the performance. Like the performance itself, I liked. I thought it had great energy. And the band had like everything in it, like backup singer, slide guitar, piano guy.
Leland Sklar.
Awesome hair all around.
Playing that double bass
including Jackson Browne. Oh, the double bass was amazing. No, but the double bass was amazing.
Yeah, I thought this performance was great. I thought it was a lot of fun.
I'll give him credit. This is a ballsy move. This album wasn't out yet. Like everybody knows Running on Empty now, but this album comes out like later in the year. So he comes out on his first song and plays a tune that's not even released yet. So you got to give him, and he plays it very well. Like I said, I think it was
I thought he was great. This was a lot of fun.
It was it was fun. It was interesting. It was interesting to watch, like I say now, because everybody knows this song. Like this album would be huge. Like Running on Empty comes out and would hit number
Yeah.
3 and like stayed on the charts for over a year. But then I hear Running on Empty, and half the time I'm like,
Well,
I don't know.
all right. I will take Running on Empty off of your funeral playlist.
Appreciate it.
I think it's a great funeral song.
But overall, season 3, episode 1, your first musical guest, first performance, pretty good.
Pretty good.
Pretty good.
It felt early too, but then I realized like, oh, the last sketch was long. The monologue was a little long, but I think what caught me by surprise was that we then went to Weekend Update with an entire cast.
Well, this whole thing is surprising. Yeah, go ahead. There's so much. My God.
There's like a new open to Weekend Update where we talk about the Weekend Update news team, and we see literally the entire cast except for Gilda walking around the desk. And they introduce our anchors, Jane Curtin and Dan Aykroyd.
But it's a new set. So now there's this weird blue screen behind them, which works fine when it's like the Weekend Update logo. It's okay. But then it's like the second joke in, they do this thing where it's like a full screen photo image in the back.
Yeah.
Like instead of like the little square on the side of the screen, now it's like a full backdrop photo. And that is fucking weird.
Yeah, it's weird. And it's kind of jarring, especially when others come on. Like when Lorraine comes on in a moment, it's very just because of her hair. And you can see that it's the blue screen and it just doesn't sit well. It's weird.
It's just weird that it's like the whole background is like a photo all of a sudden. Like it takes you out of the newsroom set, so to speak. And it's like, what is this?
Well, you feel like they're blocking a part of whatever photo they're putting up because they are. And
yeah, because they are.
And it's weird. But anyway, Jane and Dan trade some jokes back and forth about Carter. I liked the joke where Dan was like, this just in, fire is the leading cause of 3rd-degree burns.
Do we like Dan? Like, I'm not, you think on paper, this makes sense, I feel like.
Yeah.
And then I watched the two of them and I'm just like, it's not really there yet. Granted, it's episode 1. I get it. It's the first time, but.
Yeah. That's kind of how I felt.
Yeah.
It was weird, right? Because I think we both really like Jane. We both really liked Jane at the end of season 2 on the desk. And to bring Dan in, to your point, on paper, it's like, well, yeah, it's Dan. But then the two of them together, and Dan doesn't seem all that into it either.
Dan does not seem like he wants to be there at all.
No.
Maybe that's why there's 4 correspondents in this piece.
Perhaps. Our first being Lorraine, who this time is not on location, quote unquote, but she's at the desk.
But is talking about Rosh Hashanah again.
Is once again talking about Rosh Hashanah, which she spent in China. And again, she's doing that voice that she has always done on Weekend Update.
Yeah.
She makes a joke about Chairman Mao sitting in state. They gave away a paperweight, which is essentially like a Chairman Mao replica in the thing. And then she turns it over and it's like a snow globe. That was the big joke.
It's kind of an amazing prop, I got to say, too. This is another season 3, they've got money. We're going to make a 18-inch long, like Chairman Mao coffin prop, for a one-line sketch. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty elaborate. Yeah.
It was. That was Lorraine. It didn't land again for me. Go back to Jane and Dan for 2 more jokes and then to Bill Murray, film critic.
After a weird weather update.
Oh, I was trying to ignore that. Yeah, that wasn't even worth talking about. It's just like...
Right, moving on. We get Bill,
who's the film critic coming on to review The Deep. And this is Bill. This is like Bill's in character as like a sleazy
as
reviewer.
Bill.
Yeah.
This is Bill playing Bill. This is quintessential Bill Murray right here.
And he comes on to say that he didn't see it. So we're going to watch a clip, and he watches a clip with Nick Nolte and Jacqueline Bisset and then Robert Shaw. And then he gives feedback to each of those actors on the clip.
Nick Nolte, lose the mustache. You look like a Denver cop.
Yeah, that was a good one. And then he throws to Garrett at the sports desk.
At this point, I feel like they're just auditioning everybody. Like this is an on-camera audition for everybody to see who can come back in week 2, because literally throwing it to every goddamn cast member to see what they can do.
And Garrett talks about Muhammad Ali and Yakahiro O from Japan, who just broke the home run record. And then we keep going. And that was Garrett's.
What was and this went on. Like they cut away to video of the Japanese base. Like this just went on and on with like no real punchline or ending to it.
No.
It didn't. No.
And then we go back to Jane and Dan for a hot minute. And they then throw to John. He talks about giving away a scholarship and then shows some photos of he went down to Mexico to give out a scholarship and he met all these kids. And then it's him giving money to this guy that he decided deserved the scholarship because the guy is handing him an enormous bag of marijuana. And then he says next summer, the scholarship is going to go to someone in Bogota, Colombia. And that was...
Which is a decent joke. It's a good joke. But... It was so, to me, it was just so weird to see John as a straight correspondent.
Yeah.
Like there's no joke. This isn't John like weatherman, like, but no, it's him trying to do a straight piece, which after his history at the desk just doesn't play. It just doesn't make sense.
Well,
to me, it just felt very weird.
They came into this totally redoing what Weekend Update is. That's how this felt to me, was we now have a news team. And so we're going to include all of these people. And the stories, like none of the stories were like they had been in the past, right? Like they're all straight doing gags,
right?
Either with photos or with props. And that's what this turned into.
And we should say that the John pictures, the reason I think they had these pictures is, this was the summer in between season 2 and season 3 when things started to change and move for some of the cast. So John was in Durango filming the Jack Nicholson movie Going South for like 2-3 weeks before episode 1. So that's why that's where those pictures I'm assuming came from when he was down there on location shooting Going South. And it's funny because he was supposed to finish shooting Going South before this episode. And of course they went over. So I think for the next 2, if not 3 weeks, he's flying back and forth from New York to Mexico to finish this like bit part in this Jack Nicholson movie. Yeah. So maybe that's to party like John's looking sweaty and not looking that good, as I have a feeling he's, aside from John being John, he's also getting his ass run ragged. And it only gets worse because in about a month, Animal House starts filming. And now he's running back and forth to Portland for like the rest of the year. So, but that was, I think, I think they just wanted to play up on John being in Mexico and what's a good gag we can do since he was down there for the last month and, came up with this idea.
Right. Well, they start the next sketch with John as well, playing a judge. And he's playing a judge in a courtroom scene that we see before the Chiron comes up to tell us that it's another episode of Mike McMack, defense lawyer, who's played by Steve. And basically, this sketch is Gilda's testifying that she was raped by Garrett, and Mike McMack, played by Steve, just totally berates her and talks her down until they take a recess. I think my favorite part of this sketch was Bill was playing the prosecuting attorney, and every time he would object, John, as the judge, would overrule it.
Steve starts laughing.
Steve would laugh at it.
Yes.
That was
kind of
that was my
joke.
favorite part of this sketch.
And it's funny, he turns to the side and talks to the jury. And my first reaction was, who the hell are these guys? There's like 8 dudes we've never seen before in the jury. Like there's no Schiller, no Whitebell. Where's Neil Levy, for the love of God? And I gotta say, right. Gilda, I thought she was pretty good in the sketch, especially here at the end, where she starts really turning on Steve and like yelling at him and screaming like, why did you do this? And you're going to let him get away with this. And I thought she was really good because we also don't see a lot of Gilda this episode. She played the straight person in the Festrunk Brothers sketch. She played the mother who handed her baby off in the pre-tape, and then this. And I think that's all we see of her. So it's weird. She doesn't get a lot of airtime this episode. And I do like that, it's a television show sketch, and they continue to use the fake freeze frame at the end, where like they pause and Don Pardo does the closing credits and Steve just stands there like trying to freeze and hold it for 30 seconds with the fake freeze frame. It's still a good joke.
It was funny too, because he's wearing these giant glasses that seemed to be bothering him, and he kept playing with them. Well, there were parts there, but I didn't think overall this was a great sketch.
But that's what, we haven't really harped on, but that's what everything was. Like same thing with Weekend Update. Like Weekend Update, there were no wow bits. There's been nothing that you're like, oh my God, this was amazing. Everything's kind of like middle of the road so far. And we've got to be halfway through right now.
We stay in the middle of the road, in my opinion, with the next bit, which is Garrett going to confessional, where Dan is playing the priest, and he tells Garrett how much the church has changed in the 6 years since Garrett last confessed.
Hey, Father, what was that noise? I told you, my son, the church has undergone quite a few changes. Contrary to what you might have been reading, the church is progressive and has modernized. This is the Trinity 3000 central processing unit with an address capacity of 70,000 bits of information. Well, what's it for? Well, basically, it's the modern priest's companion. This terminal here has a direct link up to the Arch Data Bank in Rome. It assists the priest in analyzing transgression and the assignment of appropriate penance. Now, you said this other woman was married, didn't you? Yeah. All right, 10 Hail Marys. Okay, anything
So
else?
it's all about the Trinity 3000, which is a funny name. Again, this is one that I was
It's
like,
clunky. It's
not fully
clunky
baked.
is the problem, because to get to its delivery, because, Garrett sneaks in, he's doing this confessional, like you said, and you've got to take the time for Dan to like type things into the computer, and then it like cuts to like the screen.
Yeah.
So the screen comes up and that delivers your punchline as like the screen saying 10 Hail Marys. It just took away, the typing and the waiting just kind of made everything a little bit clunky. They had a nice twist at the end. I'll give it, I did like where at the end, because Garrett basically is on the run. He's like hiding from a bunch of dudes. And Dan is like, well, we can put you on a plane. And then he turns into like a travel agent and like books Garrett a flight. And it's like, do you need a rental car? And like hatchback or sedan? Like, so that part I laughed when he turned into a travel agent. I did think it was pretty funny. And he hands him the ticket and Garrett takes off. So, we'll often complain how sketches don't end. And I thought this one did actually end pretty funny. It's a nice twist.
Yeah, I agree. The next sketch was a repeat.
Well, this is weird. So we're watching them off Peacock or on the DVDs. And so on for some reason on Peacock, they rerun from season 1, the Beatles offer 2, like Lauren's second time offering the Beatles to come on. So this wasn't in the original airing. And I have no idea why they put it in this. But if you do watch it now and like wherever it's available, you're going to get Beatles Offer 2 again for some reason.
I was just very confused.
We'll just get more confused with the next sketch.
Yeah, the next sketch was Great Moments in Rock and Roll, hosted by Lorraine. She has a name that I did not write down.
Alice Sloan is her name.
Alice Sloan. And she's talking about great moments in rock and roll. And then she talks about Roy Orbison. And all of a sudden it goes to a flashback of Roy Orbison, this time John playing Roy Orbison. And Lorraine's now playing his girlfriend who was arguing with him. This is very confusing. So I'm going to try to make sense of this. And then he gives her his glasses, which I guess is what she mentioned in the rock and roll show. And then it just turns into John singing Pretty Woman.
None of what you just said has anything to do with the sketch, by the way. None of that has anything to do with the actual, I think what the idea of the sketch is, of this Roy Orbison impression of standing still. What is it? Stand still and wears dark glasses. Like that's what Roy Orbison's bit is.
Right. And I thought once we got to the part where it was John starting to sing Pretty Woman, I thought that was kind of going to be our sketch though, because it had been so long. And then he went in and sang a good bit of like it was long.
It was not good.
Not fun.
Not John's best impression. This is I believe this is written again, we were saying Franken and Davis, along with Jim Downey, I think did this one. I should also say, I think Franken and Davis wrote the defense lawyer one. So again, we're seeing more Franken and Davis. We're going to see more later this episode. So their fingerprints are getting a lot more obvious on the show. But yeah, like John does this thing, and he's even getting help from the vocals. I mean, this is like a 180 from season 1 where he comes out and blasted Joe Cocker to perfection. And now he needs help with the vocals for Roy Orbison.
Well, just real quick, Roy Orbison is a much better singer than Joe Cocker.
Then why do it? Why do this sketch? Because the whole point of the sketch, apparently, so there's this joke that his whole routine is he stands like still and wears dark glasses. And like just where I'm like, where is this going? His physical humor is good because he starts to fall over basically. He's gotten like so stiff and wooden that he falls back. Cause I was at this point, I'm like, why is he still going? What is the point of this sketch? Cause it's not a good impression. It's not like he's doing Joe Cocker where you're like, this is amazing. He's doing a bad impression. And it's like, okay, this is the joke, but they don't really explain why it's the joke, like why he's falling over. He just falls over and then they pick him up and it got some decent laughs. And I thought Bill was really funny as the manager who runs back out and like tries to pick him up and then hold him up. And then by the end, John can't even stand straight. So it's like Bill trying to hold him and then he's on the ground and Bill puts the mic down for him to sing while he's on the ground. But it's just like, I don't know what this was, sadly.
Yeah, it felt like a recycled piece, but I don't know.
Yeah,
it
like
was
I
weird.
Said, the impression wasn't good. And then, I don't know. More Franken and Davis.
Yeah. You talked about Franken and Davis putting an imprint on this show. They take over the last bit of the show with the Franken and Davis Show.
Yeah, I mean, this is the fourth time we've seen them, but this is the first time we see them, as the Franken and Davis Show, which we'll see now for the rest of their time.
So they come on and it starts off with the two of them opening their show, talking about how most comedy teams have a straight man and a funny man, and their shtick is that they don't have a funny man. Then they bring out Jane and say that she's going to be playing Anita Bryant for this portion of today's Franken and Davis Show. And then it is a Mr. USA pageant where it starts with all of the cast in there. I think Bill is Mr. Illinois, John is Mr. Texas. And then you see like Zweibel's there as Mr. New York. Yeah.
Schiller, Downey.
Yeah.
Neil Levy's in there. Akira Yoshimura's in there. It's great.
That's right.
Couple random dudes.
And then Anita Bryant or Jane introduces the final two contestants who are Franken and Davis as Mr. California and Mr. Arkansas in a swimsuit competition. So they come out in Speedos and do a walk.
Which is funny because, because this is funny because this is kind of like
the
quintessential image of the Franken and Davis Show. I feel like every time they show it, it's this image of the two of them wearing their Speedos and the, Mr. California, whatever sash is like every time Franken and Davis, it's the very first one this is what they always show.
And this also kept going and felt very long. And I wrote, finally, Steve comes back because we haven't seen Steve since the lawyer bit. And he just comes on to do a walk as the former Mr. USA who's going to give up his crown. And I felt like that took a long time. Like just this whole thing felt like it kept
did.
going.
I mean, you said like they come out and do the swimsuits, then they run off stage while they introduce, she come back and they do like the talent competition. And like Al Franken does the football. Al Franken, by the way, is built like a fullback. Oh my God.
That's a skinny fullback.
Wasn't he a wrestler? I don't know. Al Franken, he looks like a square box. I don't know. I was impressed on his physique. I'll give him credit. Because I remember that story about Garrett Morris talking about when Al Franken stole his sketch and he was going to get into a fight with him, and he remembered Al Franken was a wrestler, and that's why he didn't say
right. That's right.
Anything. But I know Bill and Dan were fun in the background. I thought Tom Davis was excellent. I thought Tom was great. Yeah. Because Jane comes out and they're doing the Q&A, and she's got a good line where she interviews or asks the questions of Al first, and she talks about, your brother's in the hospital. And he's like, what?
That was funny.
And she's like, oh, sorry, that's Mr. California. And then Tom comes out and she basically asks the same thing. He just goes, yes. And like she asks him these long, drawn out questions, and his answer is just simply, yes.
Yeah.
And to me, I just thought it was perfect. He starts talking about his brother in the hospital, and she's like, yes, we know. Like, we've already gotten past that. Like, let's move on. To your point, yes, Steve finally comes out as the former Mr. Universe. It's a very long piece for Franken and Davis.
Yeah.
Very long.
It was. There were funny bits. I really enjoyed that bit with Franken and the brother.
I don't know what it is. I prefer Tom Davis so much more than Al Franken in these old school Franken and Davis bits.
Yeah.
I feel like people in general, like Al Franken's more well known, I guess, maybe, and people know of him better and think he's funnier. But every time we see these two, I so much more enjoy Tom Davis. His performance, his everything is just,
he's
to me,
really
I find him so much more enjoyable.
I enjoyed this. There was a point though where I was like, it just feels like it's been on for a while now.
Well, and I think we're going to see that a lot this season is we just start getting longer sketches. I think, the days of the quick in and outs, like I think they start to go away, and you get more of these longer sketches where people are trying to showcase themselves a bit more and get the screen time. I think that it's part of what we start seeing in season 3 and 4 is fewer sketches per episode and longer sketches.
Right.
And I think this is a good example of it's just long.
Well, it was so long that I was like, oh, are we done the show? Did we only get one Jackson Browne number? No, we get another.
No.
Jackson Browne comes on and performs Pretender.
Now he goes back to it. Yeah.
I thought this was a really good performance. I really like this band. I think that's what it comes down to. Like, I
Band's
think they do
very
a
good.
great job. Yeah.
Band is very good. Why is the bassist playing a 12-string bass? What's up with that? I wondered it in the first song.
It's Leland
got, like,
Sklar, man.
He's got like the double bass thing going on there. What's
Yeah.
up with that?
He's one of the best bass players ever.
I thought I knew this song, but I don't.
No.
Like, is this I'm just asking, like, is this a good version of this song? Like, is it
I don't know.
Is it indicative of the album version? Because I was like, oh, The Pretender, I know this song. And then he was singing it. I was like, oh, I don't really know this song.
Are you thinking of another song?
I don't know.
No.
I was just kind of like, oh, what's going on? And I got to say, Jackson Browne does a much better job performing without a guitar than James Taylor does. He at least knows what to do with his body.
Yeah.
He looks natural behind the microphone. He's got a beautiful head of hair. But yeah, he goes, again, so I like this. This was his album that came out last year, The Pretender. This was the second of 2 singles off that album. So people knew it, but he waits for the second song to play it. Like, good for you. And, like you said, great energy. I think it's a good performance of the song. I just don't know it.
Well, now I thought after that performance by Jackson Browne, like, oh, we're done the show. But no, apparently I don't. There's another commercial that comes on, and my immediate thought was, what went long or went short that they had to throw this commercial in here at the very end of the night?
Well, this is also weird because if you go on SNL archives and look up this episode, they show this commercial in the Royal Deluxe slot, and then they show Royal Deluxe before Jackson Browne. So I'm not sure what played where on the actual live airing of this.
Weird.
But it does feel odd. Like, it's like Jackson Browne, and then it's like another commercial parody, pre-tape.
Yeah.
To end the night, basically.
Yeah. It's for the Chromega 3, which is a watch so complex it needs 2 people to make it work. So it just basically shows you how you need 3 hands to make this watch work.
And it's a funny gag. This is a
funny gag.
This is a classic SNL gag, I feel like. Like, here's the watch, the voiceover, the one hand comes in, the second hand then comes in. They do a bit about skiers, and they're wearing the ski gloves, and they're trying to operate the watch. Like, it is a funny sketch, and it has to be a parody of a current commercial. I tried to look it up. I didn't find it, but this has to be a parody of something from the time. It's just it's too spot on to not be.
Right.
But in watching this episode, the way it is currently available, it does feel weird placed here. Yes.
It definitely did. It's just so awkward, because then immediately after this sketch, we go to the good nights, which is Steve just saying good night. And that was it.
Yeah. Did you notice they're taking a break already? They come back and Don Pardo's like, we'll be back in 2 weeks with Madeline Kahn. It's like, you've been off for 4 months. You got to take a week off already?
That's not up to them though. At this point, like, NBC's still calling the shots on when they're on
But
air.
why would you bring the show back for 1 week and then go down a week again? I mean, it just seems odd you'd go down right after week 1.
I don't know. Baseball.
Maybe they watched this episode and that could be it too, actually. Actually, good point. Or maybe they watched it and was like, we need a week to fix this shit, guys.
Yeah. Watching Weekend Update, the NBC executives decided they needed an extra week.
They're like, can we give Madeline Kahn an extra week? Plus, last time we gave her an extra week and look how good the episode was. Let's give her an extra week.
Yeah.
Because I feel like at best, this is an okay episode.
At best. Yes.
At best. Like, I like nothing really stood out. Even after it's over, like, is there anything you can call back to and be like, oh my God, that was great? Like Royal Deluxe too? That's it.
I'm going to say this now. This is my least favorite episode of the season.
Yeah. I mean, Weekend Update is puzzling. Steve.
Yes, that's a nice word for it.
Steve just seemed off.
He wasn't in it all that much either.
Exactly. He either wasn't in it, or when he was kind of just off, or not, at least not as on as he had been. Like the last time he was in, remember he hosted, he was in the cold open, the locker room, like you could feel that vibe. Not that he felt disconnected from the cast, but that level of intimacy wasn't there anymore. Maybe because he didn't do anything good with Gilda, other than that, because the defense lawyer sketch was kind of weird, but like you missed that element, which was a big factor in the last time he hosted. Maybe the hype was just, I feel like most people back in September of 77 were like, I'm just glad the show is back. Like the show's back. It's awesome. And Steve's here. This is going to be great.
Maybe.
But I think this is just the hindsight of, it's season 3 and then you see Steve and you're like, okay, like this has got to be great. Like he's 2 for 2. It's like Buck, like even a bad Buck Henry episode is still a pretty good episode. It's like, this is easily his worst episode, but it's not. And that's the thing. Nothing was horrible. I got to say, there's nothing we watched and we're like, this is horrendous, except for maybe Weekend Update. But like,
right.
The sketches themselves, the defense lawyer thing had moments. Festrunk Brothers, there was something there. Franken and Davis was just long, but at its heart, it was funny. There must be another sketch I'm not thinking of that was in this episode. Oh, Roy Orbison was kind of rough.
Yeah. No, again, like there's just it's a strange episode.
It is a strange episode, especially to kick things off. Yeah. And especially with Steve.
Yeah. Well, we know that he gets better. So that's a plus.
There is that.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we know he comes back multiple times. So
he'll be back twice this season. Don't worry.
Yeah, exactly. So that feels good knowing that he's going to be better next time we see him.
I mean, the show is back. I think that's the overriding excitement is the show is back. It's season 3. You can tell there's a new vibe going on. There's a new air around things of what's happening. And it is definitely a different show. And so it'd be fun to see how this show progresses this season.
Absolutely. Well, Brad, what are your best bits?
Royal Deluxe 2. I'm going with a pre-tape. I'm going with a pre-tape as my best bit. Speaking of pre-tapes, no short film by anyone.
Oh,
like
that's
no Gary
a good point.
Weiss, no home movies, like no short film.
No,
Huh.
I have to agree with you. I think that was my best bit as well. That was the most enjoyable bit of the night. And so it goes. Well, we'll see you next week. Maybe next week we hit it out of the park with Madeline Kahn. Next week, we're going to be talking about season 3, episode 2 with host Madeline Kahn and musical guest Taj Mahal. Looking forward to that one. Until then, good night and have a pleasant tomorrow.
Good night and have a pleasant tomorrow.
The Not Ready for Primetime podcast is a 2 Pints Productions production. Produced and edited by Brad and Gary. Thought about by Brad and Gary. Please rate and review. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.